Let's see, what's the next one here? Oh, this one's always fun. So trying to find out the value of the property and what we throw out, running the comps, running the comparables. Um, how do you do this? How do you present it to sellers? And as a seller, how can I make sure that that what you're showing me are the homes that I need to be using as a comparable sale?
Well, it's interesting. So I always do a two-step approach when I'm meeting with sellers for the first time to look at their home. Um, and it's interesting. I've picked up so many listings over the years just because of what I'm about to say. Is I'll come into a home and I've got the tax records with me. Maybe I've got a copy of the MLS sheet from when they purchased it, depending on how long ago they've owned the home. I'll print out kind of high level comparable sales in the area. So an appraiser is going to follow certain guidelines that have become very strict over the last few years, ever since the Dodd-Frank rules and the financial crisis, where, and I think I've shown you this before, I'll sit down with a piece of paper in front of the sellers, I'll draw a little pretty little house picture with the smoke coming out of a chimney, and I'll draw a 1 mile radius around that house, 15% plus minus square feet, sold in the last 6 months. And then I'm going to pull together a list of everything that's active, everything that's sold, and I'm going to bring those sheets with me. And I'm going to then sit down with the seller after we've gone through the house, talked about what I think needs to be done to help the home sell, and then I'm going to find out what they plan on doing. Are you going to leave the house in its current condition, or are you going to make the improvements that we've talked about? And then I can go back and I can run the numbers. So any real estate agent that walks into your home and says, I've created a CMA and I think your house is worth $525,000, you should escort them out the front door immediately, because they have absolutely no idea what your kitchen looks like, what your bathrooms look like, what's the flow of your house. Was there an addition done to the home? Was there a garage enclosed? Was the Florida room enclosed? Is there any step downs into those spaces? Were those spaces permitted? Without knowing all of that and the interior finishes, how on earth can you come up with a value for a home? So
Yes.
I price homes the same way that an appraiser would price a home. And that's my first step, is coming in and looking and talking about it. Then I go back and I'll drive by all of those homes that are currently on the market. And I'll put my buyer's hat on and say, if I've got $550,000 to spend, is this the house that I would buy? And if it's not, then I need to make some adjustments. Either I need to improve the property or we need to adjust the price down to offset the competition. And then I come back with the seller and sit down and go over all of my findings. And most of the time when I do this, sellers they believe everything that I'm telling them. They can see the images. They can read about the reports. The other thing that's important too is when you're looking through the list of properties that have sold, is they may have sold 6 months ago, which means they could have been under contract for 30, 45, 60 days before that. And then you need to know, was there any seller concessions given to that buyer? So if a buyer today is buying a $500,000 home and they're able to get a 3% seller concession towards their closing costs, so in essence, the buyer has built into the purchase of this home closing costs, there could be $10, $12, $14,000 worth of closing costs into that sale. So that really wasn't a $500,000 sale. It was a $488,000 sale if it was $12,000 back in closing costs. You need to know that. And the only way to know that is to call the agents that were involved in those. Kids at home. And the only way to know that is you've got to call those agents that were involved in that transaction and find out, hey, were there any seller concessions? Tell me about the floor plan. And, if you're working with a good listing agent, they may well have been in those homes already. So they'll have a good idea of what was unique about that house. Where did it sit on the water? Where did it sit in the neighborhood? Was it next to some rundown homes? Was it across the street from a rundown property or a commercial building? Or was there a cell tower or power pole in the backyard? These are all things that make a difference in the sale of a home. And I'll often say, I'll break this down for sellers. if you've got two identical houses, the interior finishes are identical. They were built at the same time. They have the same kitchen, the same flooring. They have the same landscape and the same paint job. Everything about them is the same, but one faces onto a busy street and one faces into a neighborhood. And they're both priced at the same amount. Which one sells first? Well, the one that's in the neighborhood. They're not going to buy the busy street house for the same price. So we have to lower the price of the house that has the challenge to it in order to make it worth the same amount of money in a buyer's eyes. And that could be 20% on a busy street.
That is a excellent point there. So because you were talking about an appraisal, right? The appraiser comes out, it's got the 1 mile radius. But if you're hiring an experienced agent like us, information like that is how you're going to end up pricing this home a little bit more. You're going to know why this home sold for this and this one doesn't. An appraiser, when they're running comps, I don't think they really take much of that in consideration. They're going, hey, look, I found these three. And this is how I'm going to appraise your home. Whereas if you hire an agent that knows the area or the market, they can go, oh yeah, that one sold for that because of this. And we're going to be able to adjust your price up because you have a better location in the neighborhood, or because you have this, this, and this.
And you and I have had this discussion before, and I'm sure you can go into a bit more detail here. When you're dealing with waterfront homes, if you're on a pie-shaped lot facing into two canals, versus you're the house at the end of a canal right in the corner. The houses are the same square feet, beds and baths and pools. Are they the same value? No, they're not the same value, because the guy that's at the end of the canal has got this pinched lot where it's difficult to get your boat in, and you've got a view that is not anywhere comparable to the home at the end that has a view down the canal and maybe down two sections of the canal.
That, with me, that happens all the time. You know, I do a lot of business here in Riviera Bay.
Do you do anything different than what I've talked about, how I kind of go through the process of exposing to the seller what the value of their home is in today's market, not last week's market or last month's market, but this market that we're in today?
Yeah, you know, and I've been working with you. I've been around you for over 10 years, you know, selling real estate. So a lot of the things that I say, I've heard directly from you. And one that I always say, as you did, is if somebody's able to walk through your front door and start throwing numbers out of what they're going to get for your home, you need to quickly let them out of your home and find somebody that's going to give you the reasons and show you comparable sales, you know, with facts that show what the house can sell for. So I do always say that. But, you know, on that initial meeting with the potential seller, I like to just get a tour from them. You know, show me what you love, show me what you hate, tell me what you've done to the home since you've lived here. What are the things that you wish that you would have changed, that would have done differently? So I can just kind of get a story for the home. Mm-hmm. And I'm making notes as we're doing that. And then on that second meeting, I like to have those comps printed up with pictures. I've driven by, I've made notes on the location of those properties, because what I've found is that a lot of the times, if you're meeting with the seller for the first time, they do have a number in their mind. Whether or not that number came from Zillow or friends and family that told them that it was worth this, or hey, my neighbor Ford that house is down just sold for that. I found that the best experiences is that when I show back up and I've got all the comps printed up, I've got pictures of, and we pass those around and we talk about each one of those properties. I can tell them about my opinion of the location of it, how I felt about the finishes, because a lot of these homes you've been in because you've either shown it or you've sold it. And then asking them for their opinion too. You know, why do you think Mr. Smith's house was more than, you know, Mrs. ABC or whoever the person is around the corner? And then when we're done with that process, a lot of the times the number that I have as a list price is almost the exact same number as what the sellers feel. That way I feel like I haven't just pulled a number out of the sky and go, yeah, we can get this for your home. Here's 4 or 5 houses that have sold. Here's how we compare to those properties. What do you think that your house is now worth? And we'll take that price, you know, combine it with where I think it should be. And then of course you're going to list that house a little bit higher than what the comps say it's going to sell for. because a lot of times you might have somebody that walks through the front door that loves that house so much that they're willing to pay a little bit more than what is just sold across the street or around the corner. But I found that experience is better for me, for everybody to be on the same page, rather than me trying to sell somebody that your house is worth this, and here are the reasons why. They've seen it with me. We went through the same process. I've educated them why those homes sold for that. And that usually ends up being that we list a house and it doesn't take a whole lot of time to get that property sold. In this market, I think that if you're not getting an offer or activity within 2 weeks, we've missed the mark. With everything that's going on right now with COVID, that time period is a little bit longer. But the market that we were in, call it 30 days ago, I think that pricing the home was super, super important. And that brings up another question that we can go back and forth here, David, but pricing, right? Sometimes you'll see a house listed at a certain price. You're like, how did they come up with that number? And you as an experienced agent, that house is going to be sitting there 6 months from now. So let's say you're thinking about selling your home and you've got 3 different agents that you're going to interview. And one of those agents' number is far higher than the other 2. Or maybe you've been in that situation where seller goes, well, the other agent said, David said, I could get $750,000. Why do you think that I can only get 600? So how do you, not necessarily overcome that, but have you faced that before? And usually what's the underlying story behind that?
I have faced that several times. And I think a lot comes down to agents just wanting to take on a listing. So they'll say almost anything to get that listing. Yep. With the thought process of, I'm going to tie the seller up in a 6-month listing agreement. And over time, I'm going to get them to realize that the market value of their home is significantly lower than that number, but at least I have the listing. And, it works for some sellers. Some sellers agree to that. And, I've missed out on listing opportunities because somebody said that they could get $50,000 more. And, yeah. And even after the fact that I've gone down and sat with the sellers again and said, please show me how you're going to get $50,000 more. Now, maybe if you've got a cash buyer that came in from Mars who has not looked at any other homes, and it's surprising, I'll hear sometimes sellers say, well, I'm looking for that cash buyer that comes in from New York. I'm like, so the cash buyer from New York has no idea what the market value is in here. They're going to see one house and they'll make a decision. Or are they going to look at 5, 6, 7 houses? And then they're going to look on Zillow and Realtor.com and really look at the market and say, yes, this house is priced fairly. It just doesn't happen. Nobody pays $50,000 more above the comps or what else is on the market. But right. Some sellers say, I got to give this person a shot because they really believe it. And I'm saying they can really believe it. But I'll tell you, in 30 days, when your home hasn't sold, make sure you write into your listing agreement that if my home is not sold in 30 days at this price, I can cancel the listing agreement. And I'm going to then go hire David Price, Brad Best, James Silver, Lene McKay. I'm going to hire somebody who actually understands the market value in this area. Now, the negative to us when we do take on those listings that have now become stale because they've sat on the market for 90 days, 120 days, is we've got to overcome the challenges that were set for us by another agent. And oftentimes the seller has that number imprinted in their head that they really want to get it. And it can be a challenge. But I think that the approach of going through the comparables, and sometimes I've even had to do this, where a seller is convinced that their home is worth more. And I've taken them in my car and said, let's go out and pretend you're a buyer. You've got $700,000 to spend. Is your house the house that you would buy? Or would you buy the one down the street that's in better shape, on a better part of the canal? And you've got to physically take people out there for them to go, yeah, you're right. You're the expert. And sometimes that happens. And I'm okay doing it. I just would prefer to do that than have some seller believe that they can get this fictitious number by an agent that just wants that listing and over time will beat them up on the listing price.
Oh,
so
yeah.
We'll finally get it down to the point where I said it would list for, and I said it would sell for, and then it finally sells. And I'm like, well, I'm not getting paid now for my expertise. somebody else is getting paid after they beat the seller up for 5-6 months and
Yeah.
make that seller's life miserable.
Yeah. I mean, the days on market for me is a real, it tells a lot, and that's something I'll look at right away when I'm getting ready to go show properties. Let's say you get a call from somebody that's had their house now on the market for 4 months. You didn't necessarily meet them to list their home when they listed it 4 months ago, but now they're looking for agents and they're going, gosh, David, our house hasn't sold. It's been on the market for 4 months. Our agent's asking for price adjustments. They end up deciding that they want to move in a different direction. And now you've got to come in and kind of clean up the mess of somebody else, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and we're looking back. Obviously they didn't hire the right agent at first. Did you do a pre-inspection? Did you go through the home and make sure you launched it the right way? And on top of all that, you overpriced the home. So you've got this combination. What do we do with that situation? How do we clean that up?
Well, what you have to do is you've got to take that property off the market for a few weeks. And go back through your normal process of the way that you would list a home, preparing the house, dealing with all of the little honey-do list that every home has, getting new photography, a whole new description, and launching the home correctly at the right price. And it is always challenging because the shine has gone off of that house.
Yeah.
But in this market, we've been successful in fixing other people's mistakes because it's a hot market. So that's where I just really encourage sellers to make a wise decision when you're hiring somebody and you're going to be paying them. The last thing I want you to do is go to closing and you see that 2.5%, 3%, 4% commission check going to your listing agent, and you want to feel good that they actually represented you well, that they brought value to the table, and you're happy paying them for what they've done to help you get to this closing table. Not that you're resentful that they've beat you up for the last 4 months and that what you could have sold the home for in the first week on the market if it was priced correctly is now $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 less, and it's been painful. And you may have lost out on the house that you wanted to buy when you put your home on the market. That house is long gone, and now you're kind of humming around looking for that next house for you that just doesn't stack up to that one that you really wanted.
Yeah, that goes back to the beginning of this interview. If you do your due diligence and you hire the right person, and I do think that calling some friends and family and getting some referrals, hey, what was the experience like at the closing table? Were you happy to pay the agent, or were you remorseful that, oh gosh, this guy just made 2 to 4%? And I'm not happy with them, as opposed to I'm super happy with this person. I'm going to refer everybody I know to them about this. And I know that you work a lot in referrals, and when you're at a closing and you're collecting that commission that you've earned, you're very proud of that because you know that you've done a wonderful job for your clients, right?
Yeah, and that's exactly how I feel, and so do my clients. And you can see that from the testimonials that we have, not only on the websites that we control, but on websites like Zillow and Realtor.com and Google. You can go and read the reviews that I don't control who writes those reviews. I can't pick the ones that I don't want to be shown, but the 99.9% of the reviews you see are all going to be extremely positive around all of the agents on the price group. In fact, I'm dealing with a client now. He was referred to me. He's moving from the panhandle of Florida. He called me because he was having some challenges with the sale of his home. And I said, look, let me just see the purchase contract. So he emailed it over to me, and I went through it, and I wrote him a list of all the things that were wrong with this purchase contract that could have blown up for him right up to the day of closing, where the buyer's financing contingency is actually not due until after the property sells. And here he is packing up his house, thinking that he's going to close on time. And now I've just pulled back the curtain, and he can see that this thing is just full of holes. And his property is in a homeowners association. There's not even a homeowners association addendum attached to the contract. So the buyer could sue her agent the listing agent and the seller for not disclosing the fact that she's got a $570 quarterly payment to the homeowners association. Now, she could get all the way to closing and decide, I'm using this as a reason not to buy this house. And
Right.
he's packed his home up and he's ready to move. And now he's faced with an empty house and no buyer and potentially a lawsuit, all because of an agent that didn't understand the contract, didn't market his house correctly in the first place, and now he's under pressure.
You know, you look at this, and this is sometimes somebody's biggest financial decision of their life.
Yep.
And sometimes they'll trust or put it in the hands of somebody that isn't willing to do all the extra work to make sure that you're not putting yourself in a situation like that.
And to add on to that, I don't think it's even they're not willing to do the work. They're just so new they don't know.
True. Yeah.
They're not working in a team environment where, you know, I'll run into something that I haven't seen in either a long time or it's something I haven't seen in 20 years. And I'll make a call to you like, hey, have you seen this? Oh, yeah. You know, and we can talk about it and figure it out. This is called a real estate practice. Like 20 years into this, I'm still seeing things that surprise me every day that I haven't seen before. But 99.9% of it is the same problems over and over again, which is why preparing a seller for these are the things that are going to be the hiccups. Let's deal with them now. And when a hiccup does occur, the seller's like, oh, you told me about that. I was prepared for it. And now we can solve the problem, make some adjustments, adjust a closing time, offer to pay for something, and move forward.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, so many agents out there do so few transactions that they don't know all of these things. And it's unfortunate for a seller who's paying the same amount of money to hire that agent as they would be to hire me or you.
Yep.